Humanoid robots. They can breakdance, take out the trash, sort and deliver your Amazon packages, run marathons, and soon will even fly to Mars. But with the latest in robotics achievements making headlines daily, are the shiny new toys really as new as we think? Ancient stories reveal something interesting. Picture-perfect descriptions of what sound an awful lot like today's advanced robotics. Some of them even said to possess a mind and a soul of their own. Did advanced humanoids really walk the streets thousands of years ago? If so, what was their purpose? And were the magic, spirits, and gods that gave them their life force simply AI by a different name, or something else entirely? Join me as we unravel some of these questions and more, and enter the Codex Legendarium. I'm Shelby Melanson. First up, ancient China, where one story described what could be the first ever intelligent humanoid robot. At that time, a king named Mu ruled during China's Zhou Dynasty. According to an ancient Daoist manuscript, the king once came across a man named Yan Shu. He was an artificer, similar to what we'd call an inventor or an engineer today. Looking to impress the king, he brought out one of his machines, and it was shaped like a mechanical person. It could walk, move its head and hands, and even sing.
The king stared at the figure in astonishment. It walked with rapid strides, moving its head up and down so that anyone would have taken it for a live human being.
But trouble started brewing when the creation started winking at a group of nearby ladies. King Mu was appalled and threatened to execute Yan on the spot as punishment. Yikes. Fearing for his life, Yan immediately took the creation apart.
And indeed, it turned out to be only a construction of leather, wood, glue, and lacquer, variously colored white, black, red, and blue. Examining it closely, the king found all the internal organs complete: liver, gall, heart, lungs, spleen, kidneys, stomach, and intestines. And over these again, muscles, bones, and limbs with their joints, skin, teeth, and hair, all of them artificial.
My parts are showing. My goodness.
But the king's curiosity still wasn't satisfied. He wanted to know what would happen if he removed different parts of the machine's body. And in the process, he discovered some unexpected connections.
The king tried the effect of taking away the heart and found that the mouth could no longer speak. He took away the liver and the eyes could no longer see. He took away the kidneys and the legs lost their power of locomotion.
Oh! Something's not right because now I can't see.
King Mu lived from around 1000 to 950 BC. That means these events would have happened nearly 3,000 years ago. So, how did Yan do it? What really powered his machine? And did it really have a mind of its own and an eye for the local girls? We might just find a hint in the term artificer. In mythology, we find stories about craftsmen who imbue their creations and their weapons with magic. Maybe one of the most famous of them is the dwarf and master blacksmith who made Thor's hammer. The weapon could actually return to the god's hand like a boomerang after being thrown, and it helped channel his power. Today, the word mostly shows up in tabletop gaming as a playable class in Dungeons & Dragons. Skip forward a few hundred years to ancient Greece during the 7th century BC. Here's the origin story of a giant bronze living statue named Talos. The poet Hesiod explains that Hephaestus, a divine blacksmith and one of the 12 Olympian gods, actually forged the giant. And he was made with one single task in mind: defend the island of Crete against pirates and protect Zeus's lover. To carry out that job, the bronze giant ran patrols around Crete 3 times a day. Whenever he spotted pirates on the horizon, he threw rocks to scare them off. But what actually gave him the power to move at all? In some versions, Talos had a vein running from his neck to his foot, and it was filled with ichor, a life-giving fluid and the blood of the Greek gods. Losing that fluid is actually how Talos met his end. Here's where it gets interesting. A sorceress named Medea tricked Talos and offered him immortality in exchange for puncturing the vein at his heel. He actually agreed, and he soon perished. But why would a machine be tempted by everlasting life? Was self-preservation built into his programming? Or does the act suggest he actually denied his mechanical nature in favor of a more human desire? Something to note about this legend. A lot of stories from ancient Greece are brushed off as exactly that, stories. But here's the thing. Homer's stories have been proven to be based in actual historical fact. And maybe the biggest example of that is actually the city of Troy, the site of the legendary Trojan War, because it was found in Turkey. And if that's true, are more stories from the past true? Talos wasn't the only robot in ancient Greece. Hephaestus was also said to have created the first human woman, and you already know her name, Pandora. But unlike later versions of the story, the original describes her as an artificial woman sent to Earth by Zeus with one single job: to release the horrors of her famous box and punish humans for discovering fire. Sounds curiously similar to the way malware and viruses infiltrate a computer, doesn't it? Infecting and damaging files, then making copies of itself to spread. Fun fact, the box was originally described as a jar, not a box. It's also at the heart of stories in games like God of War and Borderlands 2. And just in case Hephaestus hadn't done enough, Homer wrote that the god of smithing also crafted artificial automated servants. They appeared as human women, but were made of gold and given the knowledge of the gods to carry out their tasks. The story begs the question, what exactly is knowledge of the gods? Something like today's high-end self-learning AI, or something else? Next, jump over to ancient India. One story there describes an East Indian king who ruled the area nearly 2,500 years ago, in the time of Siddhartha, or as he's more commonly known, Buddha Shakyamuni. When the Buddha reached the end of his time on Earth, the king was entrusted with guarding his treasured remains. To do it, he hid them underground and stationed a unit of mechanical soldiers to protect them. The automaton warriors were described as being quick as the wind and able to use swords to slice and dice trespassers. Languages like Sanskrit and Pali even had a name for them, translated as spirit movement machines. As for where the tech came from, one version says secret robot-making knowledge was actually stolen from ancient Greece and Rome, while others say the robots were given life by the Hindu god of craftsmen. Are you noticing a pattern here? Stick with me. Around the same time, we find the first mentions of a famous earthen protector, around 2,500 years ago in Jewish tradition. Here we meet Golem, a humanoid figure crafted from mud, clay, or dust. They're said to be crafted by Jewish rabbis or mystics and brought to life with ritual magic. The most famous of the many stories about them comes from 16th century Europe, where the Golem of Prague was born. According to Jewish tradition, Rabbi Judah Loew sculpted the giant from clay as a protector for his people. For a long time, it obeyed the rabbi, performing physical labor, and it guarded the Jewish community. But eventually, it became too powerful, and it turned violent. The rabbi had no choice but to deactivate it. Most stories suggest the key to its life force and its defeat lies with a magic word, a prayer, or letters of the Hebrew alphabet that are placed on Golem's body. The words provide the living statue with creation magic, or in other words, a soul. The details change slightly from story to story, but in essence, erasing or changing that magic works like a built-in off switch. The story has gone on to inspire modern ones ever since. For instance, one of my personal favorites, the most famous video game golems show up in Minecraft, the best-selling video game of all time next to Tetris. In-game, golems are either brought to life by the player, or they're found guarding otherwise defenseless villagers. The Pokemon Company stuck even closer to the legend, with Golett and its evolution Golurk. The two creatures are said to be thousands of years old, sculpted from clay, and, interestingly, run on a mysterious energy. They were made to protect the ancient people who created them and serve as laborers. But they're also said to lose control if a seal on their bodies is removed. Sound familiar? Over in Japan, there are legends that say household objects can come to life. They're called Tsukumogami, a class of yokai, or Japanese spirits. Details about them started appearing about 1,000 years ago. Legend says household items, like teapots or umbrellas even, could be rewarded after serving their households for 1 century. On their 100th birthdays, they'd receive souls and become alive. They're usually described as harmless or even friendly, but some stories say they also come with a warning label. Don't mistreat them or throw them out. Otherwise, the living tools might get spiteful and start causing trouble. So far, we've talked about a few modern references inspired by these stories, but here's where a lot more of them start popping up. 90s kids like me might remember a movie called The Brave Little Toaster. In it, a toaster and his friends were abandoned in a family's cabin. They were deeply lonely, and they dreamed of being useful one day again. So naturally, they set off on a crazy adventure to go find their owner. Unfortunately for them, they came face to face with advanced appliances when they reached the city beyond. and they start to worry that they might not actually be useful after all. That's not actually a far cry from reality, given today's AI-driven smart appliances that we're seeing now. Just like Golem, there were a few Pokemon based off these Japanese spirits too. But this is far from the end of machines and tools coming to life in pop culture, for one reason or another. Disney's Cars, Beauty and the Beast, Pixar's beloved lamp, Mr. Potts' flying car in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Optimus Prime and his fellow Autobots in Transformers, living toys in One Piece, the car named Christine, thought up by Stephen King. What do all these characters have in common? A very human-like desire to be wanted. Next, let's talk about the Renaissance. That's where Leonardo da Vinci was getting his early start on the high-tech age. Detailed sketches from his notebook reveal plans for a mechanical knight designed sometime around the year 1495. It's based on the anatomy of a human being with the same proportions as the Vitruvian Man. A number of recreations have been made to test da Vinci's design. They found that the knight could stand, sit, raise its helmet and visor, and individually move its arms, thanks to an internal pulley system designed to mimic human muscle in combat. 100 years after Da Vinci, a clockmaker in Spain started constructing a mechanical monk at the request of King Philip II. That's after the king prayed at the bedside of his ill son. The monk gets its power from being wound by a key. It can walk, pound its chest, and raise a rosary in its hand. Its face is just as lifelike, and it can move its eyes, head, and mouth, speaking silent prayers. The pious monk is actually still working today, almost 400 years later, and it's kept at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. Okay, so that's a lot of history and myth to unpack. At the heart of these stories are a few major questions. If ancient living robots really did exist, why did they vanish for hundreds of years? And why didn't we see the robots again until the 20th century? Japan brings us a couple of theories. Some legends say Tsukumogami spirits don't appear because people just don't keep stuff around for 100 years anymore. Others suggest they're repelled by electricity. And that theory may not be too far off. The world's oldest surviving encyclopedia shares a similar idea. Pliny's Natural History from way back in ancient Rome says that iron wards off malicious spirits and magic. That seems to fit in with the ancient legends we've talked about so far, plus quite a few more we didn't, where humanoids were made out of gold, bronze, clay, and wood, but never iron, even though the Iron Age had already begun at the time of the earliest robot stories. Finally, the biggest question of all.
Does this unit have a soul?
Take a closer look at the word automaton. It was first used by Homer in his native ancient Greek. It comes from autos, or self, which later became automatos, or acting of one's own will. From there, it was translated into Latin as we know the word today. But the modern definition has a different kind of ring to it, aka a mechanical device made in imitation of a human being. The changes to the word mirror the explanations of the ancient stories. The older the example, the more it's described as alive compared to the relatively more modern counterparts. Think King Mu's robot versus Da Vinci's knight. We basically go from a machine having its own will to simply imitating human will. Some might say that's just because primitive explanations didn't have the understanding of modern science. But could there be something else at play here? Take the humanoid robots we talked about earlier. Does the Artificer's robot's flirting suggest that it was really alive? How about Talos? Does his wish for immortality and the fact that he got tricked into trying to get it imply human nature? And did Japanese teapots and umbrellas really have souls, proven by their human-like desire not to be thrown away? Compare that to today's AI, which drives modern humanoid robots. The more advanced they get, the more their behavior looks human. Chatbots actually get anxious after conversations about trauma, crime, car accidents, or even war, and they're less effective when they're stressed out, much like us. On the other hand, the same things that help people chill out, like mindfulness exercises, work on the bots too. No matter what you believe about the origins of these stories, it's worth asking why so many of the world's oldest cultures all have their own tales about humanoid robots, and why, back then, their main purpose was a grand one, to serve as protectors. Even if you chalk that up to people needing greater protection from the elements and the violence of early societies and baking that into their writing, divine guardians are still a far cry from being designed to take out the trash. And even if the robots of ancient history were actually fueled by magic, is there an unseen force powering the robots of our modern era too? What do you think? Are the magic, spirits, and gods of ancient times just artistic liberty and imagination? Or did these ancient stories really describe the first ever living robots? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into mysteries, myths, culture, and science, drop us a like and subscribe. There's a lot more coming. Thank you.